Good morning, everyone. This is Robert standing in for Mike with your morning report for Monday, 7 April 2025. Let's get started with Inside the Beltway. And first off, over the weekend, Senator Ted Cruz released an episode of his podcast where he's talking about the potential bloodbath that Republicans are facing in the 2026 midterms. And he says this is due to the Trump administration's tariffs imposed last week, which he says is an enormous risk to the U.S. economy and is risking a GOP wipeout in the midterms. Ted Cruz did make, I think, a important point in this episode. He said that the business community has systematically underestimated how much Trump views tariffs as a permanent feature of economic policy, which I think will play into the midterms and the 2028 election when we get to talking about some of California Governor Gavin Newsom's moves on trade later in the show. He did say Trump could hit a home run if he does lower global trade barriers and then removes these blanket tariffs, which is some of the speculation going on about Trump's strategy, including, I think, our analysis that Trump could be engaging in that trade strategy to ramp up tariffs on everyone, including China, and then roll back tariffs from other trade partners. And moving on, the federal courts have created an AI task force, and they're considering new AI policies after some of these federal circuits have started using AI tools to speed up their legal processes. And a former federal district judge pointed out that the courts have so far been very cautious about using AI tools after some high-profile incidents that occurred during the Biden administration. I think in some of the biggest ones in 2023, when there were some high-profile federal court cases where lawyers had used AI and the AI had hallucinated non-existent legal cases and precedents. And then finally, inside the Beltway, Jared, if you can move us to the next slide. Maryland District Judge Paula Zenas ordered the Trump administration to return an El Salvador national, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, to the U.S. on Friday. And she set a midnight deadline for the administration to comply with the order. That's midnight tonight. The Trump administration, I think on Saturday, asked the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals to block this order, and they said that the judge's order is constitutionally intolerable. The Fourth Circuit Appeals Court has not issued a decision on this appeal yet, and if they don't step in to block this district judge's order and give the Trump at least give the Trump administration more time to return Garcia to the U.S., I think, as Mike and I discussed, this could be the case where, this could be a trigger for the Trump Resistance 2.0 to declare that Trump is defying the courts and that the U.S. is in a constitutional crisis. And so we're still waiting to see what the appeals court says. But there have been some other cases that have the Trump resistance types have been saying or setting up a constitutional crisis where the appeals courts have stepped in and allowed the Trump administration to proceed with some of these executive actions, including firing independent agency heads from the Biden administration. Moving on to our roll-ups for today. Peter Berezin, he's the chief of global strategy at BCA Research, and he said over the weekend that there's a 75% probability of a U.S. recession. He said this is due to, or could happen due to, tariff retaliation from U.S. trade partners. And he said that what's happening here is that the economy is on the cusp of what he called an ugly feedback loop, where less consumer spending due to economic uncertainty leads to lower hiring and more unemployment, which then leads to even less consumer spending. Texas, half of natural gas power generation projects in Texas, what's called the Texas Energy Fund, have dropped their plans to build new power plants. And Citigroup analysts said that this energy fund is called the Texas Energy Fund is falling apart, and they expect more of these power companies to pull out. From what I've seen, a lot of these power companies that have dropped these power plant projects, they said there have been supply chain issues. One of the biggest ones being that gas turbine producers have actually decreased production capacity because there have been so few of these gas power plants built in the last few years, especially under the Biden administration. And also low profitability is hitting new power generation construction. I think this turbine production bottleneck is likely to hit some of these other states that are trying to expand power plants that we've talked about, where they're looking at liquid natural gas power plant expansion. I expect these supply chain issues to hit those other states as well. And then finally, more than a dozen states, including Florida, Texas, Oregon, and Pennsylvania, are considering state-level bills that will require employers to use E-Verify to confirm employees' legal status. And some of these states, policies like this already exist, like here in Florida. and the bills are looking to tighten up those E-Verify requirements. For example, here in Florida, it's any employer with more than 25 employees has to use E-Verify. And one of the bills under consideration in the State House here would require all employers to use E-Verify. And Jared, if you can come on and run us through your roll-up items, please.
Absolutely. The Philippine government is providing legal assistance for 3 Filipinos that China arrested for espionage last week. And the Philippine National Security Council is accusing China of just retaliating against the Philippines because the Philippines has also been rooting out Chinese spies and arresting them. That I think this is important just because it does have the potential to grow into an international incident if China's uncooperative, and Philippines is obviously going to go forward with the legal assistance. South Korea is starting to voice concerns about leaked U.S. Department of Defense documents that state all forces in the region need to refocus on the defense of Taiwan. Now, South Korea is mainly worried that the U.S. is either going to draw down U.S. forces Korea, which is about 28,000 troops there for defense of Korea, or require Korea to militarily commit troops to Taiwan's defense. And I don't think a drawdown is necessarily likely. Just their Army and Air Force troops. It's hard for them to fight on the water, But it would not be shocking to at least see the Koreans be required to at least secure the sea next to them. Especially
just really
because
quickly,
there's a major.
Just really quickly, you've made a point pretty consistently that the U.S. is really building this anti-China coalition in the South Pacific. Has Korea talked about any of their cooperation with that prior to this situation where they're concerned about Taiwan?
They did, but most of their commitments were under the previous president that declared martial law and is now being ousted. So we'll have to see where they stand on the commitment for everything. However, being that they're in a somewhat unstable position right now, that may make them more amenable to being told, hey, you need to commit to defending the seas right around you, especially because that's basically they overlook a major Chinese naval base. It would make sense to just say, hey, defend this spot right here. You don't have to leave. You can defend both your peninsula and this sea at the same time. Moving on, but staying in the region, moving over to Panama. Secretary of Defense Hegseth is headed to Panama for the annual Central American Security Conference down in Panama City. Now, the conference is going to maintain its normal discussions, which are on illegal migration, because that's the largest security threat for Central America. But it's going to expand into to encompass joint security operations and strengthening cybersecurity in Central America, which, keeping in mind, he's going right to the spot where Panamax 25 is taking place, which we covered last week, that major basically naval operation that the U.S. Navy is running with Panama to practice securing the Panama Canal. I expect that to come up.
So have you seen anything else on, just for a potential quick update, have you seen anything else on the issue with the C.K. Hutchison and the port deal with BlackRock down there?
No, the last official update was that China would review the deal. They haven't said whether or not they are going to move forward with either allow the deal to move forward or force C.K. Hutchison to basically back out.
Thanks for that, Jared.
Then moving over to Iran, Iran's foreign ministry spokesman said that Iran would never develop nuclear weapons for any reason due to the Ayatollah's standing fatwa. And this was specifically to counter some calls from Iran's parliament that they should develop nuclear weapons anyway, just in order to maintain equity in talks with the West going forward. So it sounds like from the top they're saying absolutely not, because doing so would be it would bring a lot of extra heat on them, at least diplomatically, if not militarily.
All right, thank you, Jared. Let's move on to our warning items for today. And in the domestic side, California Governor Gavin Newsom said that the California state government is going to seek exemptions for California-produced exports from retaliatory tariffs. And he said foreign leaders have already reached out to his office, and he said they're concerned over volatility and uncertainty from the Trump administration's trade agenda. California can't enter into formal international trade deals. This is the exclusive jurisdiction of the federal government. However, Newsom could push for some informal deals in trade delegations. But I think what's actually going on here is that Newsom's expected to run for president in 2028. And I think this is political maneuvering. And the idea is to increase Newsom's national profile, demonstrate to the Democratic voter base that he has foreign policy competence, which would put him ahead of potential other candidates. And I think even more importantly, I think Newsom is attempting to peel off finance and tech sector support that defected majorly to the Trump camp in 2024, because we've seen some expressing concerns over these tariffs, like Bill Ackman, Jamie Dimon, and the tech sector is also poised to be hit by these tariffs very significantly. I think even Elon Musk put out a tweet that kind of implied that he was concerned over the Trump's trade agenda. So I think this is an attempt to peel off that support ahead of both the 2026 midterms and the 28 election, because that seemed to be a major deciding factor for the Trump campaign, and was a major break for finance in the tech sector, which historically has had kind of an unofficial deal with the Democratic Party, as Mark Andreessen pointed out right after the election, that there was this basically unofficial deal where the tech sector could do what it wanted to do as long as it gave money to the Democratic Party. And I think there's, in this struggle within the Democratic Party to find a path forward ahead of the midterms in the 2028 election, I think many in the Democratic Party see that defection of the tech sector as a mistake on the Democratic Party's part, and they're going to try to reverse that ahead of these upcoming elections. And then, Jared, if you can come on and run us through your warning item, please.
Yes. So the Brigadier General Christopher Shepard, who is the Air National Guard's mobilization assistant to U.S. Indo-PACOM, the Indo-Pacific Command, is present at Cope Thunder 2025 first edition. Now, there's a lot of moving parts here. So Cope Thunder is a semi-annual interoperability exercise and Northern Island Defense. You can see the air bases that are supporting it here on the map, marked with an airplane. And it only recently returned to the Philippines after being an Alaska defense exercise for 33 years. Now, there are several other observers, which we will get into in a minute, but the General Shepard, he advises Indo-PACOM on how to use Air National Guard troops for their readiness levels and how best to use them in the event of crises or emergencies. This, to me, suggests that Indo-PACOM is preparing options to use the Air National Guard in a Taiwan or Philippine contingency. Now, marked in blue here, there are also several other first-time observers. Oh, and this was the first time that I could find a public record of the Air National Guard mobilization advisor attending this exercise at all. Everybody else was always assets that were already stationed in the region. Haven't seen this one before. Now, in addition to that, all of the countries marked here in blue, so Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, Australia, Japan, they're all first-time observers as well, and they all participated in the blockading exercise that we covered earlier in the year in January. So what I think is happening here is that they are looking at a similar role as what we're getting from Brigadier General Shepard.
All right, thank you for that, Jared. Let's move on to questions and answers. And I see one question. We're going to leave most of these economics questions for Mike, who should be back tomorrow. But there is one from Ben that says, if the U.S. market and economy gets a cold, many other economies are in the ER. Is there a threshold at which other countries will capitulate on the tariff issues, and which countries may blink first? Well, I think we're already seeing some blinking. I think Vietnam over the weekend called the Trump administration, the White House, and said they're offering to remove all tariffs on U.S. goods in return for removing the proposed tariffs. That I don't think actually the higher tariff rate goes into effect until Wednesday. So I expect that there will be more. I think there's signals coming out of the UK, like Keir Starmer said over the weekend, globalism is over. So I think there are signals coming from these other countries that they're willing to negotiate in somewhere between getting these trade imbalances balanced or just completely removing tariff and non-tariff barriers like Vietnam is proposing.
Yep.
Go ahead, Jared.
We covered it a little bit last week. There were some immediate signals that from a lot of the Asian allies that they would be taking action, not retaliatory action, but hey, how do we negotiate this down? Just from what I saw this morning, I saw Israel, Cambodia, Japan, Vietnam, and Taiwan were all officially sending delegates. So it's everybody that is, they require the U.S. for national security. They're immediately capitulating, saying, okay, let's figure this out because we can't have an economic crisis in the event that there is a war.
Yeah, and there's a couple other ones that I saw. That I think Singapore also called the White House and offered to remove all tariffs, and maybe even Thailand. I think So yeah, there are already countries doing this. As far as like what the motivation is or what the threshold is for them to capitulate on tariffs, I think it has to do with just how dependent they are on imports in the U.S. A lot of these countries, a lot of companies over the last few years, especially since, well, not just, especially since there's been a lot more chatter in D.C. about this 2027, potential crisis or conflict with China. A lot of companies have been moving their supply chains out of China to other countries just around China, obviously in Southeast Asia, to Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand. And so I think that is the threshold. There is just the amount of import or for them export reliance to the U.S. and the access to the U.S. market. Yeah. All right. And then I also saw a comment from Red Flyer. Oh, let's see. Scott Irwin, can the states negotiate trade deals per the Constitution? As far as I understand, no, it is exclusively federal. The federal government has exclusive jurisdiction over international trade deals. What they can do is, as far as when it comes to an actual signed treaty, but they can negotiate informal deals over, hey, you buy almonds from California, but as far as I understand, they cannot sign a trade deal on, tariffs for all almond imports from the United States or all almond exports from the United States. But they can do like informal trade deals, send delegations to talk about partnering, partner investments, foreign direct investment, stuff like that. And then I did see a comment from Red Flyer about forced green policies have consequences. For the last few years, many energy companies could not get bank funding on any of these projects. And the smaller or lesser known companies were hit hard by these policies, and most of them kept quiet because the funding was like getting the plague in the business world. Yeah, this is, I think Mark Andreessen, right before the election, he basically put out this relatively little known information about debanking that the Biden administration was engaging in. And that's what a lot of this is, that nudge strategy that was used heavily by Obama and then Biden. And the idea is to make these little tweaks to incentivize certain actions. And in this case, they were giving subsidies to green energy and creating energy policies, emissions policies, and stuff like that, with the goal of making it more difficult for fossil fuel companies to continue, like these utilities, coal power plants, liquid natural gas power plants, to continue operating. And if I remember correctly, the Biden administration, they put that pause on LNG export licensing. And then I think it was a couple of weeks ago, the Department of Energy found this research paper that the Biden Energy Department conducted, or they think it was the EPA, that's saying that actually all these things that the Biden administration said that allowing more LNG export would do, like increase domestic costs and increase greenhouse gas emissions, whatever, all of that was not true according to this Biden administration research. And they just kind of shelved it and didn't say anything about it before pausing those LNG licenses. So there's a lot of these little nudge things that I think are going to continue having consequences, especially in the energy sector. There are some of these policies that the Trump administration and Republicans in the Congress are talking about reversing, like the Clean Power Plan 2.0 stuff, these emissions rules, that clean energy waiver for California. but they're still dealing with some obstacles for that. And I think the deadline for most of those policy reversals under the Congressional Review Act is May. So they're coming down to the wire on reversing a lot of those policies that have, like you said, I think we'll continue to have or create obstacles for getting the U.S. energy security back on track. All right, let's see if we have any more questions from Bad Web. Has anyone seen a comprehensive plan on rebuilding our manufacturing sector? I don't think that. Well, part of that is the Trump administration has invoked the Defense Production Act. A lot of that is unlocking funds, for government investment into these sectors like critical minerals. But I think right now the situation is a lot of companies that could reshore manufacturing, they're saying that they feel there's too much uncertainty right now over these tariffs and Trump trade policy, even though Trump has explicitly said he wants a lot of this manufacturing reshored. All right. From Dawn, question: how many Dems showed up at the Capitol last Saturday? I'm not sure what the exact true number is. I saw a lot of these hands-off protests. There was even one here where I live over the weekend. Not a huge turnout, maybe 100 to 200 people here. And I've seen others in some bigger cities where they've had a few hundred. Definitely not on the level, like Mike has said, not on the level of the 2020 protests as far as turnout. And let's see, Frozen Nomad. If Trump is playing it smart, he'll find a way for certain Asian nations to save face and present them with something they can take to their people as a small win, at least. And I assume you want to address this, Jared.
Yes, I think that's exactly right. And we've talked before about using the tariffs for non-economic reasons. Basically, hey, we're going to hurt you economically just so we can get other capitulations out of you. I think that's probably what's going to happen. So basically over in Asia, you tell them, okay, we will pull back the tariffs. Yes, you can maintain, you can commit us. You have to bring your tariffs off, but we're also requiring you to, like, using the Korea example, if you want the tariffs off, secure the Yellow Sea.
All right. Well, if that is the end of the questions for today, we'll be back with you tomorrow at 08 Central. Be safe and stay out front.